Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and let's talk about Orzvhov Afterlife, or if you'd rather know it as Orzvhov Visitation. So this is the first kind of week prior to Ravnica Allegiance Standard kind of kicking off fully, and I wanted to dive into as many deck techs as I possibly could this week. And we're going to dive into an Orzvhov list first, as far as the guilds within Ravnica Allegiance. And Orzvhov has the mechanic Afterlife, which is a super fun mechanic. So let's get started. But of course, before I do, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to hit that bell icon to be notified whenever a video goes live. Also, I'll be streaming on Twitch today at noon Central Standard Time, so links will be in the description as well as pinned comment on the top of this video. But let's get into it, guys. We are talking about Orzvhov Afterlife. Deck list is right here. It's about 39 tickets on Magic Online and about $197 in paper if you want to build this in paper. Full deck list is here. Full deck list will also be in the description. Let's continue with our creatures. First up here is our Hunted Witness, Orzvhov Enforcer, Midnight Reaper, Ministrant of Obligation, Seraph of the Scales, and Tessa Karlov. So a lot of stuff from Ravnica Allegiance as well as Guilds of Ravnica in general. Basically everything from Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance. I just recognize that. Hunted Witness and Orzvhov Enforcer and Ministrant of Obligation all create us, as well as Seraph of the Scales, all create us tokens after they die. So very, very good for that. However, Hunted Witness does not create us a flyer, just creates us a 1/1 with lifelink, but it's still fantastic as a turn 1 play for us. 1 mana 1/1 when it does die. We get a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. The Orzvhov Enforcer, a little bit different here, creates us a 1/1 flyer whenever it dies, but it also has Death Touch, meaning that the Enforcer will likely trade with something that we don't want on our opponent's side of the field, so very good for that. Midnight Reaper, a little different for us in this deck list here. A 3-mana 3/2 Zombie Knight. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you, and you draw a card. So Midnight Reaper seems like it's kind of going against what we're trying to do here, because eventually we'll be creating a lot of tokens on the board state, and Midnight Reaper doesn't trigger on tokens, so it has to trigger on actual creature death. So keep that in mind. But I do think Midnight Reaper paired with Tessa Karlov, it's just kind of a match made in heaven for different kind of effects. We'll get to Tessa in just a second. Ministrant of Obligation here is a 3-mana 2/1 with Afterlife for 2. Wish this card had flying. Feels like it needs to have flying. It should have flying, but it doesn't. Ministrant of Obligation, just Afterlife for 2, which means if it does die, we get 2 1/1 flyers. Still very, very good for our board state. Seraph of the Scales, this is a nice big bomb for us. A 4-mana 4/3 flyer. We can pay 1 white, it gets Vigilance. We can also pay a black, it gets Death Touch, and it has Afterlife for 2 as well, giving us 2 flyers once it trades with something or dies as well. So lots of good stuff here for us. Really like this kind of setup so far within Ravnica Allegiance for Afterlife. Tessa Karlov is the card here to really focus on. We only have 3 in the deck list. Probably worth it to go with a 4 if you really want to, but I went there with 3 and had a lot of success with this in brewing. A 4-mana 2/4 legendary creature Human Advisor rare. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So think about all the things we just talked about with all the other creatures in the deck list. Now think about those Afterlife triggers triggering twice. Now think about us drawing 2 cards each time a non-token creature dies with Midnight Reaper. Of course, it does deal 2 damage to us, but we're drawing 2 cards. That's really good value. And of course, Hunted Witness gives us 2 lifelinkers as well. Creature tokens you control also get Vigilance and a lifelink. And again, after all of our creatures die, we get Vigilance lifelinking creatures. That's fantastic. While the deck can certainly stand on its own without Tessa Karlov, I do think that the deck is much better with Tessa on the battlefield, thanks to all of the effects that we have on the battlefield kind of triggering with her kind of secondary double trigger, as well as all of our tokens getting Vigilance and lifelink. Of course, one of the things you do want to keep in mind for Tessa is that it is a removal magnet, so once it hits the battlefield, an opponent will try to remove it as quickly as they possibly can, because, again, if they remove anything else on the battlefield, those triggers will start happening double, and of course, our tokens will start having Vigilance and lifelink. So let's move on to our spells really quickly and talk about those. We've got a few spells and enchantments on here. We've got Final Payment, Kaya's Wrath, Vraska's Contempt for our spells, Legion's Landing, and Divine Visitation, which you know this is going to be in here for our enchantments. So Final Payment is a 2-mana instant. As an initial cost to cast a spell, pay 5 life, or sacrifice a creature or enchantment. Destroy target creature. This is an instant speed removal spell. This helps us sack our creatures if our opponent won't let us. It kills our creature, has a Midnight Reaper kind of go off. The Tessa trigger goes off. We get 2 tokens. We draw 2 cards for 2 mana, and also destroying an opponent's creature. and also destroying one of our creatures. Final Payment is perfect in this deck list. Everything you want to do with an Orzvhov Afterlife list, fantastic. But if we don't have Final Payment and we really need to board wipe the entire field, we have Kaya's Wrath here as well. This is a 4-mana sorcery. Destroy all creatures. You gain life equal to the number of creatures you controlled that were destroyed this way. So again, we're creating the situation. If Tessa's on the battlefield, we're creating that double trigger ability, double draw ability from Midnight Reaper, or triple draw. Could be a quadruple draw. It's crazy because Midnight Reaper is insane in this deck list. But also we're being able to wipe the entire board state and then gain us some life, and then again have tokens right after that. Vraska's Contempt is here for the kind of more mid-rangey and control matchups. A 4-mana instant, exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. Pretty simple and straightforward. Vraska's Contempt is really only here to kind of shut down the Nexus of Fate decks, the control decks, the Teferi decks, that kind of thing, the Vraska decks. Not many other options for us for Vraska's Contempt other than maybe Arclight Phoenix or Kindling Phoenix, things like that in the more Izzet or Jeskai lists, or maybe the just mono red aggro lists. We do gain 2 life with Vraska's Contempt, so that is something to like as well, but it is kind of one of the least sufficient or efficient removal spells for us, other than just being great at being able to target a Planeswalker. Next up to enchantments here, we have 4 Legion's Landing and 4 Divine Visitation. Legion's Landing, pretty fantastic as a turn 1 play for us, a 1-mana legendary enchantment. We get a 1/1 with lifelink, and whenever we attack with 3 more, we get to flip Legion's Landing, turning into a land. It gives us a white mana, and we can pay 3 and create a 1/1 lifelinker. Now, along with that, we have Divine Visitation. Let's read that card really quickly. This is a 5-mana mythic enchantment. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. So again, a Legion's Landing turns into a 1-mana create a 4/4 flyer with vigilance, and if we have Tessa on the battlefield, that token also has double vigilance, not really double vigilance, just a vigilance again, and then lifelink. So it's a 4/4 flying vigilance lifelink token. That's ridiculous. Also, you know, if a Hunted Witness or a Orzvhov Enforcer or something dies with Tessa on the battlefield, that's creating 2 tokens, which creates 2 4/4 flying vigilance lifelinkers. This deck gets really a hand really fast. It can really kind of bulldoze an opponent if they're not ready for that Divine Visitation hit on turn 5, because it's going to always hit on turn 5. We got to get it down as quickly as possible so the rest of our deck list can kind of come together. Now, do keep in mind, if we have Divine Visitation out, have a lot of creatures out, and then we have Kaya's Wrath in hand, we can Wrath the entire board state, flip all of our creatures, make them all flyers, and then attack in the following turn. That's very good for us. We also gain some life off of that as well, thanks to Kaya's Wrath secondary ability. So doing a lot of good stuff for us. Lots of really great synergy within the deck list here. I really love how everything is kind of interacting with each other and kind of playing off of each other really nicely. So let's hit up our land base really quickly here. We've got Ark of Vraska, Godless Shrine, which is of course a shock land for us. This is actually, I think, the old one from the past sets, from past Ravnica sets, but the art is irrelevant. It's Godless Shrine. It's in Ravnica Allegiance. Don't want to confuse anybody there. Isolated Chapel, Memorial to Folly, and then Plains and Swamp. Of course, we have the numbers below that. Memorial to Folly is here because if opponent removes a lot of stuff like a Tessa or whatever, we can grab a creature card from our graveyard and put it back into our hand. So if we need maybe a secondary kind of a Afterlife trigger like a Seraph of the Scales or Haunted Witness, we can definitely do that for only 3 mana. If we need Tessa again, we can go get it with Memorial to Folly. Ark of Vraska is here because we're going to go pretty wide, pretty frequently, and really quickly. So hitting that Ascend trigger for Ark of Vraska is not impossible. So I really do like it for the deck list here. And of course, Plains, 6, Swamp, 7, and 4 each of the dual lands for us. Godless Shrine being shock land, and of course, Isolated Chapel being the bunny land. Let's move on to our sideboard really quickly. We've got Duress, Seal Away, Tocatli Honor Guard, Ixalan's Binding, Settle the Wreckage, and Eldest Reborn. So the kind of sideboard is here for us for multiple matchups. We have here for the mid-range matchup, the control matchup, the aggro matchup, as well as just kind of shutting down anything we don't like with Ixalan's Binding. So Duress is here for the control and mid-range matchup. Really, really good against the mono black control matchup, which kind of is coming around right now in the meta. A 1-mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards a card, so pretty decent as a turn 1 play. Seal Away is here against the more aggro matchups, the mono red aggro, the Boros aggro, that kind of stuff. I will keep in mind, or say, Seal Away does not work with creatures that have vigilance, so do not board in Seal Away if you're up against a heavy Boros list that has a lot of vigilance stuff, or a night list, because those creatures will most likely have vigilance. So do keep that in mind. Seal Away does not work on vigilance creatures because they have to be tapped. It's a 2-mana flash enchantment. When there's a battlefield, exile target tapped creature and opponent controls until Seal Away leaves the battlefield. So So again, if they have Vigilance, Seal Away does not work. Keep that in mind. The Kali Honor Guard is here for our Goblin Chain Whirlers, here for any kind of random Ravenous Chupacabra in Golgari, a 2-mana 1/3 Human Soldier. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. So we don't really have anything in our deck that has abilities to trigger when they enter the battlefield. However, we do have abilities to trigger whenever they die. So do keep that in mind as well. Ixalan's Binding is a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Ixalan's Binding leaves the battlefield. Your opponent can't cast spells with the same name as the exiled card. This is really good against the Is It Drake list. This is really good against the Jeskai control lists, as if they are tapped down for a Teferi or an Arc-like Phoenix or something like that, and we grab one of those two objects or one of those two, points of interest for their deck list, Ixalan's Binding basically shuts down their entire deck list, and that's kind of amazing. Really love Ixalan's Binding. Having multiples in the deck list is always really good against those matchups. So if you want to board more in, you can definitely do that instead of maybe Seal Away. But we do have Settle the Wreckage here for those aggro matchups and mid-range kind of go wide strategies, the Selesnya matchups, the Golgari matchups, and of course Arc-like Phoenix as well. A 4-mana instant, exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards, put those onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. So again, Settle the Wreckage, very good against most matchups. I will say, keep in mind that the Gruul matchup right now has the Gruul Spellbreaker, and Settle the Wreckage is really bad against that particular card, so I would recommend using Ixalan's Binding, Seal Aways, and maybe Eldest Reborn kind of after the fact on your turn to shut down the Gruul deck instead of Settle the Wreckage. It's going to work on most creatures, but the Spellbreaker really does hurt Settle the Wreckage in your hand because, again, it just turns it off. It makes your opponent hexproof for the turn, it just doesn't work because of that. The last two cards in the deck list here for the sideboard is Eldest Reborn, fantastic against the Carnage Tyrant and more hexproof, kind of heavy to deal, heavy damage kind of decks like that. A 5-mana enchantment saga. Chapter 1 is here is each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Chapter 2, each opponent discards a card. In Chapter 3, put a target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it could be your opponent's graveyard, it could be your graveyard. Most likely you'll want to use this card to get back your Tessa on Chapter 3. Very useful for your deck list. But that Chapter 1 there is pretty much perfect on getting rid of a Carnage Tyrant or a large threat on your opponent's side of the field, so do keep that in mind. We do have Kaya's Wrath in the main board to kind of board wipe if we really need to, but Eldest Reborn is really good if opponent has some fantastic creatures that we just can't hit. And so Eldest Reborn helps us with that. But that is the full deck list for Orzvhov Afterlife. If you want to look at it again on online, if you want to view this on Magic Online, it's coming to about 39 tickets, and again in paper, 197 bucks. I love this deck. This is such a fun deck to play and brew with. So let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. Let me know if you have any kind of tweaks for it. I really kind of tweaked this deck list quite a bit in testing, putting it together. I did put it together on stream as well a couple weeks ago during when all the cards came out. I had a stream where I put everything together with all my different deck lists. So if you're into that, again, stream will be in the links in the description as well as the pinned comment. Streaming today at 12 Central Standard Time. So love you guys. I will see you in the next video. Peace.